Grand Rising, greetings and salutations wherever you are on the planet. Welcome to another edition of 360 Info Network with Vince Robinson. Our host, Hamtonio, is out in the field today, and he may be joining us a little bit later. But let me first start by saying thank you to everyone who wished me a happy solar return. It's been an amazing couple of days, and I am eternally grateful for everyone who took the time out to say happy birthday to me. I really sincerely appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. We have a very special show today. As you know, the arts are very near and dear to me, and we have a filmmaker who has created a film that is going to have an impact on your psyche. I guarantee it. It's going to be premiering at the Mandel Theater at Tri-C's Eastern Campus on Sunday, April 14th. And you will definitely want to get your tickets, take part in the red carpet event because it's going to be fabulous. I guarantee you. With all of that, I'd like to welcome the 360 Info Network, our great friend, Mr. Joey Billups. He is the founder and the owner of Trybal Productions, and that is the production company that created this great film. Welcome to 360 Info Network, Joey.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me, and thanks for all the guests that are here to watch and observe everything that they're going to hear, and hopefully have you to come to and join us at the premiere.
Okay. So I want to dispense with the formalities and just let folks know who this man is. You know, I've gotten to know him quite a bit within the past couple of weeks. I knew him as a police officer. He is someone who is high up there in the chain of command when it comes to having security clearances and so forth and so on. I met with him the other day, and one of our colleagues shared some information about him that kind of blew me away. I just knew him as a police officer, but I came to know him as a result of attending the Tri-C Jazz Fest and having conversations with him. And I found out that he was a filmmaker, and he told me about some of the projects that he was working on. And I was amazed, but I had no idea that he was working on that level. There are Hollywood productions coming in and out of Cleveland as we speak. I think the film Superman is being filmed here. And of course, if you look back, there were a couple of other high profile films that were filmed right here in Cleveland. But, you know, we have a resource, we have a great body of talented people and individuals in this community who are doing great things in cinema. And I have to say that Joseph Billups is one of them. So, why don't we start just by you filling us in on this great film that you created?
Well, this film is titled, to start with, The Emancipation of Miss Millie. And this is a film, should I say, not a story. It's a film that came from a story from a young lady by the name of Mickey Harwick Lett. She, in our conversations numerous times, showed me a story she did while she was in school. I read it and I was appalled. I said, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. That's it? And you haven't done anything else with it? May I have this story to do it in a film? A couple of times she didn't believe it would be something that would happen. She finally agreed to do it. And we took it and we took a 17-page story that she did in school as a project and turned it into a 98-page script. And within that, it took us 11 shoot days to complete it. And I have to say, it's done.
Okay. So, what is the story? Tell us a little bit about what we're going to be watching.
Well, this story is based on a slave owner family. Miss Millie and her husband John Dutton, they own one plantation and was gifted another plantation from his dad. Well, the men in the family were kind of very promiscuous, and they had a lot of fun drinking libation and alcohol, and that caused John to become a little different, and he was kind of abusive with his wife. And she dealt with it, but in the process of all this, she was also dealing with taking care of the plantation home and had a young lady, a slave, who she grew fond to. And in growing fond to, who also was with child, they kind of bonded, and the two of them kind of shared and observed the things that was happening. Miss Millie then decided she was tired of the abuse, and she was seeking help from whoever she could get it from, and she did, and the story goes from there.
Okay. So one of the things that I found kind of unusual about this is that it puts her plight and the plight of African Americans who were enslaved kind of in the same place. You kind of juxtapose those two things together in a way that enables you to have a certain sense of compassion for both sides of this story. Why did you decide to amplify her struggle along with the struggle of enslaved people who we all know had to endure the things that they had to endure during that time?
Well, I have to say to you, in the process of doing the film, even though we got the story from Mickey, we were struggling through what was the correct spelling of Miss Millie. Was it MISS or MRS? Well, back in the day, the men of the different plantations, or should I will call them the European men, still never had a respect for women, and so Miss Millie didn't have or gain or have the respect, so she was still a miss to him. Mrs. gives you privilege and gives you rights. She didn't have rights. And as you know, back in the slave days, the men slave was still abused and take advantage of these slave women. And this Miss Millie, she was in one sense treated like the slave women and disrespected, disregarded, and there was a need to make a change and make an adjustment. So the addressing of Miss Millie and how she dealt with things were very important to get this story across and get this story in an area where it kind of depicts a lot of things that happen with women, whether they're African Americans or people of color or Europeans or whites. And this story takes a lot in terms of showing the difference, or should I say, the indifference of each side.
You know that's really interesting, Joey, because as I look back at history, just as you've just shared with us, women had it just as bad as we did in certain respects, but at the same time, they enjoyed a certain level of privilege just because of their association with their male counterparts. But when we look at history, we see a system of patriarchy that's been in place for such a long time, and to a certain extent we're still dealing with that patriarchy, which is evidenced by the fact that you have a feminist movement, you also have a black feminist movement and all those other things. But that's a great perspective. We're going to be doing a talk back after the film, and we'll talk about some of the things that will happen on that day. But I certainly hope that folks will get engaged in this film and get engaged in the content, because there are so many layers when you watch that film. You worked with a lot of folks that are maybe familiar to people in the Cleveland area. Do you want to talk about some of the folks who worked with you on this movie?
Yes, we had a large amount of talent and crew that work with this project. Christine Johnson has been known to be in a lot of productions in Caramoo and Ma Rainey and the Black Messiah, the Black Nativity, and the list goes on. You had Mia Jones. She was also one of our fabulous, fabulous makeup, not makeups, correction, our wardrobe costumer. She was unbelievable. You had Mary
Mary
Allen,
Frances Miller.
Mary Francis, yes, and you've had Angie with the J, we say Randall. These people are very, very fabulous. Daryl Tatum played in Fences, that played also in Aurora Theater and several other locations. You had oh my God, you had Joe Quinn, you had Lauren Paulus. And these two are the main characters with regards to the slave owners. You've had Joshua, uh, oh God, the list just goes on and on and on. We've had a young gentleman who helped us with the horses. His name was Mike. We call him Mustache Mike. He was fabulous with his horses. They were great, Great horses, well trained, well mannered, and very responsive. There's a young lady by the name of Stacy Greer. She owns Maple Crest Farms in Brecksville. She provided us with the carriages, some of the props, the building, and what she did and how she trained and consulted us in how to work the carriages, the horses, and everything on the farm. She was a spectacular young lady, and I have to give my kudos to her as well. We had Hell Farm. Hell Farm allowed us to utilize the back half of the entire farm for our project. The house, the roads, the shacks, the livestock, and the list went on. And Becca McCarthy was the one who really helped us to get past all of that and moving closer in. The Mayor Fritz, David Fritz of Moreland Hills, allowed us to utilize the area by the Garfield House in Moreland Hills for one of our scenes or one of our locations. Oh, and the list goes on and on and on. I have to say to you, people ask me, how did we work with this? We had 57 cast and crew that we had to work and juggle around in dealing with those various personalities and situations. It's a task, but we pulled it off.
Yes. And I would assume that the person who pulled all this together was a local director by the name of Kevin Taylor. Can you talk about what he did and how he brought this whole piece to life?
Well, Kevin Taylor was our director, and he handled making sure that the talent was on point with regards to what they presented and how they delivered their messages in terms of the script studies that they had to do. And the cast crew were the top shelf crew members that made sure everything looked cinematic and right. You know, you see some projects, as much as they put a lot of work into it, and I take my hat off to them, sometimes it's a challenge to be able to get your project to look cinematic and look the way you want it to look through your imagination and your creativity. And Kevin was able to do this.
Yeah, I have to say you're absolutely correct about that. You know, when I'm looking at the opening of the film, and you know, a lot of movies start with an aerial view of the city and so forth and so on, and it requires thousands of dollars to execute that. You didn't have millions like some of the major filmmakers do, but you were able to give it that flavor. And then the scenery in that opening film, you know, it seemed like you were somewhere down south. You know, you could have been in Louisiana or in Florida or somewhere exotic compared to Cleveland. But I mean, I guess I'm a little effusive right now, but I was just so amazed at the some of the camera shots and angles. Being a filmmaker myself, leaning towards the documentary style, it's kind of simple to shoot documentaries, you know, because it's mostly talking heads and photographs and stuff like that. But when you see this film, you know, it looks like a Hollywood production, but we're happy to say it's a Cleveland production. I also have to give a shout out to your man, Daryl Tatum. I saw him in an August Wilson production at the Beck Center just 2 nights ago. And he was kind of the center figure of that film. It's called Jitney Taxi Service, and he plays the role of this person who owns the service, and he's a stand-up person in the community. I saw him in Fences, and now I'm seeing him in that film, and now I'm seeing you. I seeing him in your film, and you know I saw him in another film just maybe 3 weeks ago. So kudos to Daryl for doing what he does, but you know, also to, you know, everybody that was in the film because they were just magical in their performance. And I got to tell you also that the ending of this film is going to make you stand up in your seat. So, do what you need to do. Be there for this affair. It's going to be in a magnificent structure. I mean, this is not like going to the Scrumpty Dump. No disrespect to Winston Willis, but this is it's going to be very special. So you can come to Tri-C's Eastern Campus on Sunday, April 14th. You can actually go online and you can get your tickets online. And Kevin Conwell and Footprints are going to be performing leading up to the film. Talk to us about what's going to happen on April 14th, Joey.
Well, on April 14th, and before I go any further, there's one other person that I must say thank you to, and that is Lillian Pyles, who is a casting director, and she's cast many a top shelf film, and I want to say thank you to that. But now moving forward to the question you asked me, when you come in on Sunday the 14th, you're going to come into the music of Kevin Conwell and the Footprints, and you're going to get a little taste of some of the pre music in terms of period piece music to kind of get you into the mood and the feel of what you're going to walk into in terms of 1853. And then you're going to enjoy the music, allowing you to also meet and greet and just kind of socialize prior. From that point, you're going to walk into the theater, and there's going to be a couple of presentations. And one of the main presentations is going to be a scholarship issued to the college, to Dr. Kitchen, for creative arts students who have a desire to come into this industry and help them to kind of help fulfill their dream and desire. After that time in which we will then start the film. After watching this fabulous production, you're going to walk in with, okay, let me see, and walk out with, wow, that was remarkable. Then we will have some Q&A afterwards, then some continued meet and greet and socializing, and have everybody to kind of share in what they saw and what they experienced. And we're going to have some of the fine area people to kind of help interview and talk about these things. And we will have also Vince there, you will be there to kind of assess that and kind of help facilitate those various people who have something to say about this great film.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to it, and looking forward to how folks will receive this film. I'm mindful of the fact that in this day and time, as people try to erase history, it's important for us to tell the story. And so you took these 17 pages and you transformed it into this film, and folks will be able to get the benefit of your storytelling ability. Um, you've also done some other films, and I think this would be a good time to talk about some of your other projects. But before we do that, I just want to remind the listeners that you're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is filmmaker Joseph Billups. He is the founder and owner of Trybal Productions, and they've created the great film that we've been talking about today. Like to encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. You can go to my YouTube channel. You can also go to Lynn Hampton's YouTube channel, The Journey with Hamptonio, and like and subscribe to our channels. It really helps us a lot. It will also enable you to get notifications of when we do these programs, and you can find these programs on our respective YouTube channels after the fact. So if you didn't get to catch the show live, don't dismay. You can always come back and see it after the fact. We really appreciate that. So let's get back to Mr. Billups and some of the other films that he's been involved in. Talk to us, Joe.
Well, there are several films that I've done. One film was titled Stand Alone. Stand Alone started out as just being a thought, an idea to kind of depict what I've done in my career as a police officer. And during my retirement process, I decided I was going to do a little short capture of what I've done. And after thinking about it, I said, I can't do it in this short period of time. So I decided to write a story. So it's partial true and partial fiction. And I did this. And Stand Alone is about a guy who retired from a police department and decided to call it a quits. But he had such a great reputation, he started getting calls, and he got a call to come back into the fold of his profession. And it was by someone specifically requesting him for some concerns that he had. That was a great film. It was a 2-hour film, a featured film, and it was fantastic. I've also worked with projects such as A Raging Silence, which ended up being one of the top five in the film festival in San Diego out of 1,500 submissions. And we were one of the five of that one. Cornell Calhoun of Calhoun Blue Production, he's the one who wrote that. I helped assist. I was a co-producer for that one, and that was fantastic. I've done another story. We done another film titled The Silent Story. I got to tell you, The Silent Story was a film that was done in 2 days. We took 3 days to write the script. We rehearsed, we put it on, and it became a winner in several film festivals behind what we do in terms of our ability, our resources, our crew and team that we work with, and it was great. So those are just a few.
Okay. What was the impetus for you in becoming a filmmaker? What started you on this path towards cinematic glory?
Well, I started out, I was a photographer and I became an instructor of photography in the police department. I was doing a lot of photography work. I was doing a lot of architectural work. I was doing some portraits and just special event type photography. This led me into going into some video, but not a lot. And then there was a young lady by the name of Lillian Pyles who asked me one day, could I come and join and help her with finding people for a particular film. That film at the time was Proximity. I said, sure, I can do that. And so I did. And then she wanted me to do a major extra role. And I told her, I said, I'm not spending that much time unless you can give me, jokingly, 32 seconds of FaceTime. Well, it happened. I got 35 seconds of FaceTime. If you know film, seconds mean a lot. And from there on, I just started getting into it, watching productions, going on sets, and I was intrigued.
Okay. So just from that small thing, next thing you know, you're making movies.
Making movies.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you do some writing. I think you also mentioned that you may also do editing.
I don't do much editing. I have a good team for editing. I kind of sit and help in terms of the editing side of the profession. My skill set is writing. I can sit down, take your story, and create a story or create a synopsis in a very short period of time. And then I take that and I can put it into a script, whether it's short or a feature, based on how I drill and deal and work with the story that I'm getting. And like my aunt always told me, she said, you can explain what you do. Yours is a God blessing. Yours is God sent. And I write stories quickly. I mean, I come up with the idea, I write it, and I give it back to you or the client. And they say, how did you do this so fast? I say, if you like it, we can build on it. And that's what I
Okay. So I want to get back to this idea of you being a police officer. I mean, these are kind of divergent situations. You know, the creative person and then the person that's in law enforcement. Why did you decide to choose law enforcement as a career?
Well, I always was in that mode growing up as someone who was always sticking my neck in people's business and trying to assist and help them out of situations that they couldn't get out of. And this led me to realizing in my own self that I was one who was always trying to help. Not a Superman, not a Batman, just Joey. That's all I do. And I got that from my mom and my dad. They would always stick out and help. We would be ready to eat dinner. We would go out in the house. My mom would say, well, where are your friends at? I said, they went home because you said it's time to eat. She said they should come in too. They were with you while you were playing so they can come in and eat also. So I was kind of raised that way. And in terms of wanting to help, I started seeing things. And there was a gentleman that I watched when I was growing up during the riots. I would watch him. He lived in the front house. He would dress up and go out. His name is Ernie Rao during the riots, and we'll watch him leave and watch him come back. And I said, wow, that's interesting. One day, I want to be like that.
Interesting. I'm curious about how being a police officer shaped your perspective on the human experience. Because, as you know, as a police officer,
Oh,
you see the best and the worst.
oh, I got to tell you, the police profession has allowed me, just like you said, to see the best and the worst. I've seen things that you couldn't even phantom. I've seen things that are dot dot dot. I can't express it. I can't share it because it is something that I keep close to my heart because it's not for all. But what I saw gave me so many stories that I could tell. I could take those stories from the true life experiences and just a storyteller. I can tell you a story that you may not believe, but a lot of those stories are true.
Yes. What was it like for you to go from being that police cadet to being the right-hand person for the mayor of Cleveland?
Well, I was a cadet, true, and I worked hard in the academy. And when I got on the job, I just did what I did. I did what I was trained to do. But one of the things that I started to realize, I was good at what I did. I worked hard at it and I was serious about it. Then I got to tell you, I got a call one time to consider working with one of the mayors, Mayor Mike White. And I had a good partner as well. And I told my partner, I said, I'm not leaving you because you and I has each other's back. Him and I arguing and fuss. He said, "Go, you got an opportunity, take it." So I did. I took it, and then once I took it, I started to realize that okay, I'm just carrying on what I've been doing in terms of being diligent, thorough, and just keeping things right and being solid about my profession. And then all of a sudden, one day, the mayor asked me, after seeing what I was doing and how I was handling things, would I consider going to an executive protection training academy? And I ended up going down to Glencoe, down in Georgia, Flexi, and I trained more and trained more and trained more. I became a good student. I built a lot of relationships, and it just grew from there. Integrity, I found out, is a very, very important part of one's life. And you need to learn how to build that and maintain it.
So, as a result of that, you ended up being the person that was identified as really the only person who was qualified to be responsible for some very impressive folks on this planet. Can you share with us some of the folks that you provided protection for as you were in that part of your career?
Well, in that part of my career, number one, you have to be trusted and you have to be looked upon as being someone that's professional and diligent in terms of what you do. I've done work with Prime Minister Desmond Tutu. I've done work with Johnny Cochran. I've done work with the Prime Minister West Senegal, South Africa, Jeffrey Debe. I've done security with uh, what's that? Condoleezza Rice, and I've assisted with the visit of Bill Clinton. President Bill Clinton came in town, and he came in town enough times that he actually remembered me, my face and all, when he would come in town. For example, when we opened up the baseball field, and I've done work with many, many different high profile individuals. I've done international travel as well. I've done travel in Japan. I've done travel in Taipei, Taiwan. And these are areas that I've done the security. And I was trusted to travel internationally and still maintain and provide security for the mayors or the mayor that I worked with at that time.
Okay. Few Saturdays ago, I went to a birthday celebration for Grandmaster Greg Mayo, and you kind of remind me of him in the sense that someone might see you and not see you as type of a threatening type of person. But I have to imagine that, providing that level of security to people that high up in the chain, you might know a few things about how to take care of somebody. Can you talk to us a little bit about that part of your being a security type person?
Well, yeah, I trained with Grandmaster Mayo for many, many, many years. I used to compete all over the country. I can remember some stories where we competed to a point that another instructor, Reggie McKissick, we actually got escorted out of the state. I'm not out of the state, but out of Canada because of our tremendous skill sets, and we were like, oh, you guys You got to go because you guys are just too dangerous. And you don't believe or hear that, but yeah, it is. On the job, I would get called to assign or respond to a certain assignment because there was a person who was in the arts and they wanted Joy Billups to come and deal with it. I say, you were trained to deal with it. Pull your weapon out if you feel threatened and tell them and give them orders and have them do it. In training with Greg Mail, we train. When I say we train, we train. People would come into our school, and the Grandmaster Art Sykes, who was there at the time, rest his soul, he would say, when the student comes in, if they really want the arts, let them prove it. Make them quit. And we did.
Yes. That reminds me of a video that I watched the other day. I think her name was Fredia Gibbs. Have you heard of her?
Yes.
She was characterized as the most dangerous woman in the world, and her father was a martial artist. And in order to prove herself to him and eventually earn her black belt, she had to get past him to get to the key to let herself out. And it took her about a month to finally do what was necessary to get past him. But from that, it built her confidence, and she just went on to become a world champion. It's an amazing story. I don't know how that got past me all that time. You talked about international, and I have come to know that you have actually been to the country of Ghana, a place that is near to and dear to myself and Brother Antonio. Can you talk about what has materialized as a result of your journey across the Atlantic Ocean?
One of my travels, I traveled joining a Dr. Yvonne Pointer McCleary, and we went to Ghana because at the time she was receiving her recognition and her title as Queen Mother. Well, in my travel with her and doing what I did, I've come to find out she stated, Joy, you're my security here. I ended up kind of doing what I do naturally. And yes, I was. But when I got there, we traveled through a lot of different locations. We've gone to the slave dungeon. We've gone to some of the other locations, the different museums, and just saw so much about Ghana that as it relates to what they've gone through and what is happening with them. But we went to one of the facilities, or not facilities, but I guess you can say one of the locations, and I observed and noticed one of the buildings, and a lot of the other buildings were like, wow. So I happened to ask the pastor of one of the buildings. I was just curious at the time. Well, the Pastor Anthony, how much something like this costs to build? And when he told me, I said, you got to be kidding me. That's it? So I thought about it. I walked outside. I said to Yvonne, I would like to donate half to build a building, and I would like to do it in the name of my son and make it a creative arts center. I told him. He was unbelievably happy because I didn't recognize how gracious and grateful they were. Well, I did that. We now, I have to say, have completed the Joseph Colin Nicholas Billups Creative Arts Center. And it's complete. They're now working in there, doing various activities in there. And we plan on going back to do an official opening for it with a play that's going to be written. And then they're going to study, practice, study, rehearse, and we're going to watch them perform.
Okay. So now you're saying that in addition to film, you're also kind of connecting to the whole idea of theatrical performances. What about theater is attractive to you?
Well, with theater gives you the ability to study, learn, and perform, but you only have one try at it. So you have to be very, very studious and very dedicated and committed to making sure you have it right. Whereas film, if you don't get it right the first time, you hear that word cut, take one, take two, take three. The theater allows you to be very creative and portray your character through facial, body language, and projection. And that's a very key part to becoming a very good talent or very good actor or actress.
Okay. As we have this conversation, and if it's difficult for you to talk about this, I understand, but I'm just reflecting on what happened a couple weeks ago with the state of the city address that was given by our great mayor Justin Bibb, and the first 20 minutes of his speech was dedicated to public safety. As I listened for nearly an hour, I really didn't hear much about the importance of the arts. We are in the process of going through some applications that were provided by artists in our community for some art projects that will be more than just murals and so-called public art. But I'm mindful of the role that artists play in our society. And I think our citizens, because they do have concerns about public safety, there's a focus on that, but not necessarily a focus on what art can do to benefit. It's my perspective that if we amplify the role of artists in our community, we can do things that will prevent police officers from having to come to the rescue. Because many times when they do show up, it's after something has happened. But I think we have to be proactive in providing art opportunities to not just children, because children become better students because they're involved in art, but also elders. You know, as you age, you don't use your brain as much. But when you engage in an artistic activity, then it allows you to use parts of your brain that might be going untouched. So, could you talk about, if you feel like it, talk about the importance of art in general in having an impact on society that helps perhaps eradicate some of the things that cause the things that we react to with public safety?
Well, art is another language, just like writing or reading or speaking. And art allows one, the artist, to express their inner thoughts on a medium. And whether it's canvas, paper, a wall, brick, or concrete ground. And art is a way for a lot of our young people and older as well to be able to convey their message and their thoughts. A lot of people have internally these feelings that need to come out, and a lot of times they kind of do it by way of art. I draw a little bit. I used to draw a lot, and I used to paint and do different type things. My favorite was scenery, and I taught my son how to do that. He really enjoyed it. Well, a lot of people have had the opportunity to see my son in all his work and could not believe it. To me, it was funny. I watched, or should I say, I saw one of the pieces that he did, and when he showed it to me, I said, Nick, who did this? I did that, and he was very casual with it and very modest. I said, no, you didn't. Yeah, I did. So when I found out that he did it, I could not believe that was his work. And since then, he started doing more and more and more work. And I'm not saying this as a father who says to a child who, oh, he's great or she's great. No, I'm saying it because he is. When people see it, they say, no, he did not do that. I say, you said the same thing I said. Yes, he did. But going to the question, art is so important in our society, and it's so important for us to make sure that we get this across, because if we can get people to do that kind of work and leave away from the idle mind, as we heard, is the devil's playground, they now have another way of being very active in their thought process. And this takes away from the issues that the police departments or public safety have to deal with, because they don't have to worry about someone who has an idle mind and find something else that's detrimental to the community.
You know, you raise a really important point here, and you talk about the idle mind being the devil's workshop and so forth and so on. And from that, I was just thinking about media in general. You know, there is I guess, series on Netflix right now called Good Times, and it's a cartoon reboot of Good Times from the 70s, but there's a lot of outcry about this. There are stereotypical depictions of Black people in this series that many people are finding objectionable. But, when you look at the landscape of programming that is available to us, a lot of it is objectionable, but it occupies so much of our mind space. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so important for us, getting back to the whole idea of the narrative, that we start telling the stories and we continue to produce films like the ones that you're producing, that give a perspective that's not tainted by an agenda of control. I think a lot of the programming that we're exposed to is designed to occupy our mind space in a way that does not elevate us in terms of critical and analytical thought, in terms of interpreting history, in terms of interpreting contemporary events in a way that enables us to understand what's going on, but also to create solutions to the problems that we face in society. So, I want to commend you for being that person who would say, well, let me take these 17 pages and make a meaningful film. And there are others. You talked about playwriting. We have Mary Weems, we have Michael Oatman, we have Terrence Spivey. I mean, and I'm probably leaving out some important names as well. But when you have that experience, just reflecting on that play that I saw the other night, and seeing and hearing August Wilson's words come to life, being in that room and seeing those actors up close and personal, it really affects you. And in the lighting, the choreography, the acting, all of that, it just kind of energizes you. And again, it speaks to the importance of us being able to have those experiences outside of the things that are being designed for us to make us think a certain way, to lower our vibrational existence, to deal with all of the conflict that we relate to in such a way. We can step back and say, I'm glad it's not me. But when you do that, you're also involved in that lower vibrational energy as you take it in. Just a few other things that I'm thinking about in this moment. So pardon me if I stray from the original subject matter. But I'm thinking about some of the controversy that we're all involved in. You had Cat Williams, who came out first part of the year and started, spilling the tea on all these things. And then you see the domino effect that has happened as a result of that. All these things are bubbling up to the surface. And then there's this whole idea of celebrity and how much we fixate on them and their lives. But the dominoes are falling. So now you see it's Diddy, and then next you're probably going to have Jay-Z. And then when you start hearing all these stories, you see how corrupt that industry is in certain ways. You start hearing about the blood rituals that are taking place, and the backroom deals, and men having to compromise their sexuality, and all these things that are happening within that realm. But then you pivot, and then you come to Cleveland, Ohio, and you have folks that are involved in doing what you do, and they don't have to deal with all of that
Mhm.
evil that's existing. And now, some say we're living in the age of Aquarius, which is an age of truth and justice, and not everybody believes in astrology. I get it, but that doesn't deny the fact that these things are happening right now. From your perspective, what do you see as the value of us doing what you're doing right now?
Well, let me start out by saying I watched and listened to an interview with Van Peebles, and he was talking about his film, Upset's Posse. And one of the things he said was the reason why he's stuck with doing independent film is because he can control it. He can control it because he doesn't have to answer or respond to big house production companies who would tell him what he could and could not do, what he could and could not portray. I get that. I did standalone without any big house production company and did it the way that I wanted to. And part of the thing that I did with that was I made sure that in the film, when we would portray and when we would deliver the film, I made sure I had several rules. One, we will not have any sexual connotation. Two, we will not have any profanity. Three, we will not have any high profile violence. In profanity side of it, a couple of times the talent would accidentally say something that was kind of instinctive to say. That I say, cut, take that word out. We're not using it. Well, moving forward, we did the film. It was a very dynamic film, and we didn't have any of the things that I just mentioned. We made sure that we kept it clean. Now, what I did was believe in making sure that we don't do things that would put a bad light on us and make us a stereotypical type person or a culture, because that's not who we're made of. We aren't made of sex, profanity, crime, drugs, and the list goes on. So why do we have to always be the one who have to portray that to make a good product? And moving to the question that you asked regarding how do we do this, and what do we think about this in terms of the big house having all these different issues going on with all the different celebrities at hand. It's like, well, they may have had some controlling issues where they had to do things a particular way. I do not know, but it looks like they're coming after everyone who's successful or trying to do positive things, and may use some things to get there. And when Cat Williams came out and spilled the beans and said the things that he said, whether it was true or not, he said it, people looked at it, and then we get the end result of this popping up. And now publicly, everyone is being kind of looked at, smeared, or shined down on because of what people now are thinking.
Yes. So getting back to the film, there were a few scenes in which, you kind of, I don't want to say sanitized it, but you knew what was going on, but you didn't have to see the graphic aspect of it. One scene that I'm mindful of is actually one that involved a person that's near and dear to me. I didn't recognize her at first, but then I figured out who it was, and I have to commend you for the way that you handled that, and I just wondered for her as an actress, to have had that role, how it may have affected her. Because it's not necessarily something that you will want to go around talking about. Yeah, I played the role of a person who had that experience, but it was important to have that in the story so that you really understood the things that were happening at that time. and
Mm-hmm.
and then another thing that kind of resonated with me is that within that film you were able to capture some of the African spiritual practices that are a part of our history that kind of get pushed to the side and kind of marginalized because we emphasize our Christian experience, but we don't acknowledge our African spiritual experience. Talk to us about why it was important for you to have that as an element in the story that you told.
Well, that was put in there because we do so much. We have so much cultural history. We have so much that we live with every day, and I wanted to show that this is something that happens. And the good part about it was this was a situation where they were in a different type life than what would probably be expected in that period in the 1850s. And they without giving it away, they were the other side of the fence, if I may. And I needed to show that everything isn't always doom and gloom. And when you're dealing with us as a people, we are always seeming to be depicted as being the doom and gloom people of the world. And that's not the case. We have successful people, we have good people, we have positive people, and we have spiritual people. And our spiritual people may not be of the spirituality that you believe in and that you look at and practice, but they have their own. Let's give them credit for what they do.
So, with that said, I have to ask this question. I'm assuming that your trip to Ghana was the first to Africa. Correct
Yes,
me if I'm wrong.
correct.
What was your perception after having heard and seen things online and on television and in films? What was your perception of the continent and specifically the country of Ghana when you got there?
Well, we did a tour and we got there and we had a tour guide who greeted us and welcomed us for being there and said to us, "Welcome home." Wow. Wow. They said, "I know you probably hear people tell you at the other land, not here at the motherland, that you aren't favored or liked as an African American towards Africans." He said, "Well, let me say this to you. My ancestors are your ancestors. So why would I not love my people from my ancestors?" That started the trip for me. I'm like, wow, makes a lot of sense to me. And then as we moved on, they started to share various things with us about what was happening over there in Ghana. And some of the things they shared with regards to the Europeans coming and acquiring some of the resources from there, and there was a revolt and a lot of things going on to fight from that happening. And they were trying to take some of the resource from the country without giving back to the country they got it from. The question was asked, that sounds something like the movie The Black Panther. They said, exactly. The Black Panther was a lot about this story that I'm going to tell you now. But you looked at the film as entertainment and not education. So as we moved on, I started seeing more and more things happening. And I got to tell you, it was a story about us going to a hotel. And we were leaving to get on the bus to go to another location. I asked a young lady to help me carry my bags. So she gets someone to help me with my bags. She said, "I'll take it for you, brother." She took my big suitcase and my big duffel bag and gave me my camera bag. And she walked to the bus, a good probably 50, maybe 50 feet away from where we were, 100 feet away from where we were. So I tipped her. She said, "No, brother, this is too much." I only gave her 20 bucks. I said, "No, no, no, this is for you." She cried. The tour guide who handled everything for us, I asked him, "Did I violate the culture?" He said, "No, what did you do?" I gave her $20. He said, "That's how much she makes a month. She lives on the compound and she goes home on the weekends, and you gave her enough to feed her family for the week." I started getting a little sinus and a little hay fever, and I had to kind of wipe my nose and my eyes because it was being very irritable. I'm joking, but it really hurt me. And I said, "Wow, I could have gave her more." And I'm looking at, this is how they live here and they survive, and they're very gracious and they're very kind. That was an experience for me.
Yeah. Well, what you gave her was the equivalent of $100 in their currency.
Yeah,
So that was quite meaningful.
very much so. Very much.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
learned a lot from that trip. That trip really enlightened me in a lot of things. And true, it was very educational, it was very spiritual, and it was very eye opening and heartwarming.
Okay. Well, speaking of eye-opening and heartwarming, the emancipation of Miss Millie is eye-opening and heartwarming. So we just want to remind folks that you can go to Eventbrite and you can get the information that you need to make your reservation to be there, to take in this great film, to take part in the pre-film festivities and the post-film festivities. Please hang around because you may have an opportunity to be interviewed and perhaps you might show up on the screen in one of the trailers that we will do to promote this film. Uh, Joe, I want to thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network. This was great, and there will be another program that you will be able to view on my YouTube channel that will give you more insight into the conversation that we just had. I'm not going to promote it on WERE, but I will let you know that you, again, go to my YouTube channel in a few days and you'll be able to see or hear that podcast as well. Looking forward to Sunday, April 14th at Tri C Eastern. And, you know, we'll do what we do on that day. And it's going to be a great day in the city of Cleveland. Any parting words before we conclude?
Well, let me say this to you. One of the things that Tribal Productions says all the time is we make movies, and that if any time you feel like you would like to be a part of what we do, we welcome you because in Cleveland, Ohio, there is talent everywhere, and God blesses us with everything we need to do the right things and do the right things for the people that we represent and that we also love. Tribal Production loves you. Joy Billups loves you. God bless you all.
All right. Well, again, it's been my pleasure. You'll be able to go to the YouTube channel and also on Facebook, and you can see what we just did. And you can also get all the information that you'll need to take part in this great event that will happen in less than 2 weeks. It's the day before tax day. So make sure you have all of that taken care of so you won't be one of those last minute filers and you can watch the film with a clear conscience. As always, we like to thank our engineer, Mr. Tone Harley. He is the person that pulls everything together for us to do what we do here at 360 Info Network. We're going to send our shout out to our brother Hamtonio, who is doing what he has to do on the line of duty. He's a police officer, and one of his colleagues transitioned, so he's paying his respects as appropriate. With all that, as we always say, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.